Hello, everyone. Mike here. I am a Star Wars enthusiast, card game enthusiast, and I wanted to come out with a way too early card evaluation video um, based for Star Wars Unlimited, just based on the first 7 cards that we see here. Um, and one thing is, I'm also the creator of force-db.com, the site that you're going to see here. And so I'm going to use that to kind of show the cards and talk about them. I'm planning on having a deck builder that, so you can kind of manage your decks, share decks with the community, etc. Um, and just have a little bit going on right now. But that's a little bit about me. Um, so what am I going to be doing today? So today, I want to talk a little bit about these cards. And in order to talk about these cards, I'm going to have to talk about some other things first. So first off, I'm going to need to talk a little bit about the rules. Now, there was a spoiler that was shared with the community, and so most people have seen it. If you're paying attention to Star Wars Unlimited information, it's been posted on all the communities, and you can even Google it. And there's articles posted about it, etc. So I'm not going to show the cards from that video until final FFG actually like releases the cards officially, which I don't think will probably be too long. But I don't, and we don't really need to like show off today's cards. There's plenty of cards to talk about today. Um, but when evaluating cards, how can you evaluate the cards without context, right? So knowing the rules is really important. And thankfully, with the rules, we have a really good idea of how the game's going to go and how the game's going to work. Um, so we'll start by talking about a little bit about the rules. Um, I'll talk about similarities and dissimilarities to other card games, and then we'll go into the card evaluations. So, first off, what are the rules of Star Wars Unlimited that you need to know about? So, let's take a look at a card here. Um, the basic rules are that you get to play cards, um, and you can play them to either the space, so space cards, or to the ground, and ground cards, space cards fight space cards, ground cards fight ground cards, etc. There's cards that have interactions, etc. But the general rule is you're going to play units and they're going to fight each other. So how does that work? Um, well, if you've ever played Hearthstone, it's exactly the same. So each unit has an attack power and a health power. And when you attack with a unit, you can either attack your opponent, which is opponent's base, or you can attack one of their other units. Um, and when 2 units attack, they deal damage to each other equal to their attack, and then you you know their health gets reduced by how much damage they took, and any units that have taken too much damage die, and health sticks, which is very important, right? It's not Magic where health ends at the end of the turn. Health sticks forever. So we're kind of simulating a single combat, right? We're like a single battle. It's not like, maybe Magic you can envision being like a war, taking place over a long time. This is like a single battle. Um, so it's exactly the same as Hearthstone, which is great. I think Hearthstone combat is excellent in terms of how the cards interact. And, a little why I think it's excellent is because it avoids this problem of the board getting gummed up. So, in Hearthstone, you very rarely have a gummed up board. It can happen, but in general, it's not like Magic, right? In Magic, there's been so many occasions where um, I've played where both players have 10 creatures in play, and because of the defender's advantage, the defender gets to choose the blockers, neither player can attack. And then it's just a game of top decking to see who's going to win. So in this game, you're going to be pushing a lot of damage through. Uh, and that's going to change how we evaluate, right? Like, so cards that in Magic would be really good probably are not going to be so good. And cards that would be really bad in Magic, like a 2/2 bear late in the game, are probably going to be a lot better here. So, we'll keep that in mind as we evaluate. It's going to be much more similar to evaluate the cards to their cost efficiency, which is probably something we do a lot more in Hearthstone than in Magic. So like how much health and attack are we getting for 3 mana here? So you see this number up here on the left that represents the cost. For 3, are we getting a lot of efficiency? And so we're going to, kind of evaluate based on that a little bit. Um, so that's one rule. Another rule that is very important for evaluating cards is how turns work. And it's going to be back and forth, right? So you do one action, your opponent does one action, then you do one action, then your opponent does one action. There's probably not going to be any counter cards, right? You're going to be taking an action and then trying to prevent your opponent's action by the action you take, which I think is super interactive, right? If you've played Destiny, it makes for a lot of tactical, you know, moment by moment decision points that can be really fun. Um, and it also keeps both players in the game. You're not waiting around for someone to decide on their next move. You're just like, okay, I do this. Okay, you do this. Okay, now I do this. You do this. So it's great. And that changes how we evaluate cards a little bit, right? So um, we're going to evaluate cards as being slow if it takes like 3 or 4 actions to really get them going, right? So it's going to change the evaluations a little bit, but it still should be good. Um, as far as other rules, um, nothing else major. There's those 2 rules alone will give you a good feel. A lot of the other rules have to do with deck building, um, or yeah, mostly mostly around deck building, to be honest. Um, and so that's those basic rules could give us enough of an understanding to be able to have some rough early, way too early evaluations of these cards. Um, so yeah, why don't we just get started? So first card we're going to look at is leader card. So leader cards, they are your commander, like in Magic, or your hero in Hearthstone. You get one of them and only one. And what's interesting about them is that, as you can see up here, I'll zoom in a little bit. You, while they're in play, they start in this sideways mode, and they're very much like a hero in Hearthstone, right? So what this says is action. You can pay 1 and tap this card or exhaust this card to give your shield token to a uh, heroism unit, which is white for the color that you played this turn. And if you control, and then the epic action is if you control 6 or more resources, deploy this unit. So you flip him, ready him, and move him to the ground arena. And the way I read that is that it's compelled, right? You don't get to choose to keep him at bay. You have to play him basically. So I think that's interesting as well. Makes for some interesting strategic decisions. Maybe you shouldn't go to six resources if you want to keep using his action. Um, and then when you do flip him, so you have 6 resources, you flip him. The rules do say you don't get to have to pay those resources. So this is just a free turn 6. Like all of a sudden you got a big guy out there. He becomes a 4/7, and on a 4/7 you may give another unit a shield token. And so both his abilities are related to shield tokens. So how do shield tokens work? Well, we actually know because they were in the spoiled rules. Shield tokens are a token, and when a unit would receive damage, that all the damage is prevented and the token is removed. So it's exactly like Hearthstone in that fashion. So if you've played Paladin, it's going to have a very similar feel. And the way that you play with Paladin types of decks is you put shields on your 1/1s. You put shields on your big dummies. You use shields in order to make trades really annoying for your opponent. So I really like this action. I think this is extremely powerful. There is a keyword in the game that some cards will have to kind of counter shields, which will kind of be a meta card. But like, we'll see. It remains to be seen how much. But that gives, at least there will be a way to counter this in case this is too powerful. It'll give a tool to those decks to be able to counter this. But being able to spend 1 token to shield your unit, it's great, right? Like, this has very what I like about these kind of cards is that um, it's good early. you put on your 2/2, great. You get to help it stick around longer. It's great late. You get to put this on your big dummy, your 8/8, maybe Star Destroyer or something like that. Well, not Star Destroyer, but you know what I mean. Um, you put this on your big 8/8 capital ship, and you're really happy. It doesn't say it has to be a ground unit. Did you notice that? It could be either unit in this case. um, and it's also interesting, even when it's here, it says another unit, which could be your capital ship. You're attacking on the ground and you give your capital ship a shield. Don't tell me how that works from a theming perspective. But Luke is he's on the attack and he's just like, here, you get a shield. You know, you get a shield. You get a shield. Yeah, it's great. But from a card gameplay perspective, this is extremely powerful. So um, you know, I give this a huge plus for the ability. So like it. I expect most of the abilities to be really powerful. Um, but we'll see. Overall, his unit, he's a 6 mana 4/7. The 6 mana, that's probably only exists in case like you have a way of. I would assume that maybe like when he dies or something, he goes in your discard. You can bring him back and play him for 6 mana. Like that's what I would assume. Um, why it says 6, but so 6 mana 4/7 is not that great. I mean, it's okay. If I'm evaluating this from a Hearthstone perspective, I'd probably want like a 6 mana like 8/8, or at least 7/7. Um, but uh, but the fact that it's 6 mana 4/7, give another unit a shield token, that makes it really really good. And 6 also seems lower. It's lower than Vader's value. And so, if maybe this is one of those cards where um, it comes out really early relative to everything else, and so it's just extremely powerful, even though it doesn't have the greatest amount of attack. Um, so really like it. I think this card will be fun to play with. It'll be great. It'll be actually annoying to play against because everything's gonna have shields, and you're gonna cry every single time. You're like, okay, I do 3 damage, and you know, you get to remove a shield on your 2/2. Yeah, that doesn't feel good. It feels terrible. Um, so yeah, I think overall this card is really good. I think it'll be played quite a bit. So let's look at the next card. This is Darth Vader. This is the kind of paired card. The art is very similar. It looks like it's from the same scene. So Vader here would also be your leader, and he's one. You pay one and you tap. If you played a villainy card, so the cards are called villainy, so black or black, you could just say black. So you played a black card this phase, deal 1 damage to a unit and 1 damage to a base. So guess what? This card perfectly counters Luke. All right, so your Luke, the player playing Luke plays a creature. It's a 3/1. Vader plays an Imperial. Luke then uses his ability to put on a shield, and Vader pings the shield off by paying one, and he does a damage to your base. That's a real feels bad, right? Like that's like oh, I just lost my shield, and I have one less damage on my health on my base, so I just lost the trade. Yeah, so it definitely does not feel, it won't feel good. Um, if you are on the Luke side, this ability is specifically good against Luke. Um, on the other side of things, if you're not playing against Luke, if you're playing against someone else, and you're just doing 1 damage to a unit for one resource, that feels really bad. Like, I mean, it probably is good, right? Like, in Hearthstone, you've got mages, and they have their fireball that does 1 damage, and it can feel really, really good. Um, but in general, mages don't usually rely on their hero power, right? If you've ever played the game, they rely a lot more on the fact that they're mages and they get a lot of really cool spells. So one damage is good. It's not, it doesn't scale well, right? So you at the beginning of the game, this card's gonna be excellent. So it's a control card. You're not gonna be playing Vader if you're trying to rush out and destroy your opponent in 5 turns. That's not what this is for. This is very much I just need to use, some damage to keep my enemy at bay a little bit. So the one damage to base is actually not very good, right? And so yeah, that'll be interesting. So this card does not scale well, right? So on turn 6, this card is not really doing anything for one resource. You probably won't ever use it, right? You're like, okay, I have a 6 mana 5/5 in my hand, or 6 mana 6/6 in my hand, or I could play my 5 mana 4/4 and then do 1 damage. You're like, I'm playing my bigger guy, right? So it's not the greatest ability. Um, and it's not like you're not gonna use the action over playing a card because of how strong it is. Whereas on Luke's card, it's so strong that you have that situation. You're like, do I play my 5 mana card or my 6 mana card? Well, I get to play my 5 mana card with a shield. You're gonna do that every single time, right? It's just you throw shield on a 5 mana card, and it's much higher than 5 mana. Like if you've ever played Hearthstone, and there's you know a card that's 5 mana and had a shield on it, you'd be like, that should be an 8 mana card. And the answer is yes, it should be, right? Like it's usually that powerful. So Vader will be really, really good early. So if like there's a Luke Rush deck, Vader will probably be really good at stopping that kind of deck. Um, you can sometimes see shield probably more mid range deck. So Vader will be able to help hold off the Luke specifically, but I I don't think his ability is going to scale. In fact, I would even say uh, let's look at it, so let's look at the other part of the card. He flips over on turn 7 and becomes a 5/8, which is great. It's a free 7 mana 5/8. Who's not going to want that? And here it is. On attack, you may deal 2 damage to a unit. That's amazing. That's a great ability. But it doesn't fit because what you're not, and this is Hearthstone. This isn't Magic. Like in Magic, you would never attack. In Hearthstone, even if you're the controller, you're gonna attack, right? You're gonna attack your opponent's units. So this will be good. And the 8 really helps, but it's not overwhelming, right? And if you play this and your opponent plays Leia and 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 turns Vader sideways, and now you have a 5/8 that's sideways that's not doing anything while while your base is dying, not gonna feel great. So I feel like this part of the card, um, I think Vader here is gonna be a lot better against like mid range or against mid range decks, or against really aggro decks. Like it's just kind of a overall weird card. My evaluation is that he's probably good against specific decks like Luke, but I have a hard time um, seeing how this card kind of fits into every phase of the game and against every type of deck. So we'll see that. So those are kind of the leaders. These are hard to evaluate. I'm not using all my evaluation criteria here because um, it's not really it's hard to evaluate the leaders. It's like, okay, I got all these heroes. I remember when the Hearthstone heroes came out and everybody was like, oh, Hunter's broken. And it kind of was broken for a while. Oh, you get a free unit with Shaman. That's broken. Like everything is broken, right? So I don't feel like these are as powerful as the Hearthstone. Um, I guess they're pretty similar. But overall, I think Vader's a little underwhelming. Whereas Luke is going to be very strong in every matchup except maybe against Vader himself, and maybe that's kind of the point. It's like Luke's great, but when he faces Vader, he's like falls to his knees or something. So yeah, I'm not going to evaluate too much on these. So let's talk about more of these cards because these are going to be the cards um, that really shape the game. So let's go into Wing Leader. And I want to talk about this card because this is maybe the most basic card that we can see. Now there is another card that is very similar that was in the rule book that would actually be a better evaluation candidate, but I'm not going to show it. But needless to say, this is a great card to start with. So its cost is 3. It's a 2/1, and it is a heroism. So you can only play it heroism, light side, white. You can call it any of those things. And it says, when played, give 2 experience tokens to another friendly rebel unit. So what are experience tokens? That was also spoiled. Experience tokens are +1/1 counters, right? So you have a 2/1, it becomes a 3/2. In this case, you give 2 experience tokens to a friendly unit, it becomes a 4/2, 4/3 or whatever. Um, so how do you evaluate this kind of card, right? So I'm gonna kind of show you my evaluation strategy. So I always kind of evaluate on a set of criteria. So the first question I always ask is like, do I want this card in my opening hand? So, and I'm just going to go through the questions. Do I want this card on turn 6? We'll assume that like maybe there's 10 rounds or 12 rounds in a game, so halfway through the game. Do I want this card, after turn 10, towards the end of the game? So those are good. Do I want this card if I'm winning? Or, so if you're already winning, do you want this card? Does it help you to stabilize your win? Do I want this card if I'm losing? Do I want this card in a stalemate type of position? Do I want this card if the board is empty? What about if the board is full? Is the card cost efficient? And trying to think if there's anything else. Oh, yeah. So kind of 2 more around board. Do I want this card if I control the board or have the initiative? Maybe saying if I have the initiative. And I'll talk about what that means in a bit. If my opponent has the initiative. So, yeah, let's go through these. So, first question, do I want this card in my opening hand? And the answer is absolutely yes. so why? Right? So let's imagine you have this card. You also have a 2 mana, say 2/2. And remember, you start with 2 mana in this game. So you play your 2 mana 2/2, and your opponent plays something. You know, they both can't attack, so nothing happens really. Next turn, you get a 3 mana. Guess what? If you get to go first, you get to play this, throw 2/1/1 counters on your 2/2. All of a sudden, you have a 4/4, and then you have a 2/1, and you did that all for 5 mana. Now, it's not the absolute most efficient thing you can do, right? You could have I've seen 3 mana 4/4s in games before like this, but the difference is you put the 2 tokens on a card that is already ready to attack. Remember, cards come in when they're tapped. So this card basically replaces the bear, right? So you went from a 2/2 to having a 2/1, which is fine, doesn't matter that much. But now you also have a 4/4 that gets to attack. This is a highly aggressive card. So let's ask our question. Do I want this in opening hand? Absolutely yes. As long as I have something to put it on, which I probably will if I'm playing the type of deck, this is an excellent card. It's excellent in probably every format, standard and let's say, limited format. But it's going to be a great card. You know, solid B card, maybe B minus card. Like you're going to put this in your decks where you're playing cheap space units or even not cheap space units. So yes, I want this in my opening hand. Do I want it on turn 6? Maybe not as powerful on turn 6, but it's still going to be great, right? Like you imagine you have your, you put your 5/5 last turn and you draw this and you're like, okay, well, do I keep this or do I play another big dummy? Well, maybe you get to play this and another card, and that's just going to be better because then you get those 2 extra tokens, those 2 extra 1/1s on your unit. So it's going to be really good. I do want this on turn 6. Do I want this on turn 10? Uh, Probably not as much, right? This is probably why it's not an A card. It starts to lose its value, um, because it's at that point it basically you evaluate it more like a 3 mana 4/3, which is not really something you need. But is it terrible? No, it's still good. Do I want this card if I'm winning? Yes. This card helps you win faster, a lot faster. So yes. Do I want this card if I'm losing? Hmm. No, actually, you don't really want this card if you're losing. Like if you're losing, let's say like, your opponent has board control, and we'll kind of tie that into if your opponent has the initiative, but if your opponent has board control, you're never gonna play this on an empty board. So not the greatest card if you're coming back from behind. But I'd also say it doesn't matter as much because this is definitely a more aggressive card, and so you probably won't you're probably already losing. Like, this isn't going to help you come back from a loss, but, it's probably not going to make things worse either. Do I want this card in a stalemate? Yeah, this is a great stalemate card. You can imagine both sides have like a bunch of cards in play. This is going to help you push some damage through. What about if the board's empty? Nope. So not on an empty board. But, even just one other vehicle in play. And it says rebel unit, which is great actually. That means it could be on like land units, so ground units. So yes, it's as long as there's one other unit in play, it's probably good to play it. It's a card cost efficient, absolutely. Three, so you get 4 attack and 3 health for 3. It's amazing. You can't really get much better than that. Do I want the uh Do I want this if I have the initiative? So you might have heard in the rules there's something called taking the initiative. That's not what I'm talking about. I mean initiative as I mean am I the one that's forcing the attack? Am I playing offense or am I playing defense right now? So maybe that's a better way of saying it. So if I'm on, do I want this card if I'm on offense? If I'm the one trying to push my opponent's base down as quickly as possible. If my opponent, if I'm on the offense, and do I want this card if I'm on the defense? So if my opponent has the initiative, they're on the if I have the initiative, I'm on the offense. This is going to help me push the game through faster. This is going to help me win faster. This is an absolute amazing card. On the defense, this card's actually better than you would think. And the reason is because as long as you have something else in play, this is going to help add some stats to it, and you're going to be able to use that immediately. So overall, great. So overall, solid card. It's going to probably show up in a lot of decks. And now we've gone through kind of my evaluation criteria. So now that we have the evaluation criteria in mind, let's go to another unit. Lay Organa. All right, this is a great example of how the rules make this card much better than if she was in some of the other games. So 2 mana 2/2. This is in Magic they would call her a bear, uh, and so cost efficiency. There's been 2 mana 3/2s, so it's not the most efficient, but good enough. But when played, either ready a resource or exhaust a unit. So that means she's either a 1 mana 2/2, which is good cost efficiency. It's actually great cost efficiency. Um, or you get to pick your opponent's best unit, and like Darth Vader, and guess what? Darth Vader doesn't get to attack. That's where this card goes from a solid card into a bonkers card, in my opinion. Like this is going to, and it's not going to be just great because she's, you can play her on the initial turn and dump another card, and and you're attacking like crazy. So in an offensive deck, she's perfect fit. But she's also plays an amazing defensive role too, which is important. Um, and if you think about it, I'll go kind of into this. If you think about it, like say you're on turn 5 and you're playing an aggressive deck, and your opponent has a big fat dummy in play and is about to, and you have the initiative because you want to go and you want to push some damage through, and your opponent is about to take out one of your best attackers. No, they don't. No, they don't. You get to turn it sideways. This card is very, very good. So if we go through the evaluation criteria, that will also help to see. Do I want to open hand? Absolutely. Play it on turn. Play it on first turn. Get to play another card. Play it on maybe the second turn. Get to play 2 cards. Excellent. Do I want to turn 6? Yeah. I mean, why not? Like it's a 1 mana 2/2, or you get to remove a defender or an attacker from play. It's great. Do I want on turn 10? Yeah, I would want this on my top of my deck. Like I would be okay probably drawing this card like late in the game. There's some situations won't work and we'll get there, but like this is an all around great card the whole entire game. If I'm winning, do I want this card? Yes. Like it's gonna help me win more. It's gonna help my opponent. It's gonna help stop my opponent from being able to come back. Do I want this card if I'm losing? Yeah. If my opponent is killing me, this will stop some damage from coming through. Absolutely. Um, do I want this card in a stalemate? Maybe this is where the card is not as good. I would say if you have a gummed up board, she probably comes in and taps down a big dummy, and that's still going to be really good value, but probably not the biggest impact. So now, how often do I think stalemates happen? I have no idea. Do I want this card if the board is empty? Um, this one's a little tougher. If it's at the beginning of the game, yes. If the board is empty at the end of the game, that's where she kind of loses her huge impact, right? Like there's nothing to target. You're both top decking, you know. You're probably not going to pick this. You get 2 cards a turn, and she'll help, but you're probably not going to be super excited. Do I want this card if the board is full? Yes. Yeah, usually. Um, again, if it's not completely full. I think she's more of a tempo card. She's going to be one of those cards that's going to either help you speed the game up if you're on the attack or slow the game down if you're on the defensive. Is a card cost efficient? It's efficient enough, absolutely. In fact, it's more than efficient. Do I want this if I'm on the offense? Absolutely. We just talked about that. And do I want this card on the defense? Absolutely. So overall, this is to me is like an A minus. This is an excellent card, um, and you're going to want it the whole game. And if you're playing against it, I'm sorry, it's going to be really, really frustrating. All right, so let's go to the next card. So, let's go, before we get to Tarkin, let's talk about an event. So we haven't talked about an event yet. So maximum firepower. A friendly Imperial unit deals damage equal to its power to a unit. Then another friendly Imperial unit deals damage equal to its power to the same unit. So this card is a little hard to evaluate only because we don't know the full rules, right? So if um, if you don't have 2 units, do you still get to use this card? I assume so. Um, but so if this card required you to have 2 units in play to use, then this card would be pretty bad. Um, and if that's the way it works, then ignore everything else I'm going to say. Just make an assumption. If this card requires you to have 2 units in play in order to use, then this card is awful and never ever use it. So I'm going to assume that that's not how it works. I assume it's like a friendly Imperial unit deals damage, and you're like, okay, that's it. And then another friendly unit, and you're like, oh, I don't have any other friendlies. Okay, nothing happens. As long as it works that way, this is all good. So let's talk about that. Is this good value? So it costs 4. You have to have 2 Imperial units. and you get to deal damage. So let's talk about how we evaluate removal cards in general. And the way to evaluate removal cards is by cost efficiency and the number of conditions you have to meet. So, uh, and those two things are kind of competing, right? So if you have a card that is expensive but it has no conditions, it's usually really good. If you have a card that's really cheap but has some specific conditions that are pretty easy to meet, it's also pretty good. If you have a card that is somewhat expensive and also somewhat difficult to meet, it's usually terrible. So, where does this fit? I think this fits in the probably terrible. Like, it's it could be really good. There's going to be some plays where you're like, okay, my 3 mana, my 3 power guy and my other 3 power guy get to do 6 damage to your 6 health guy for one card. And you're like, awesome. That was perfect. You're about to win the game because of it. And then, but the odds of that scenario happening are pretty low, right? If you know Hearthstone, cards trade a lot, right? Like cards are, you're not gonna. This is not going to be like Magic where you're gonna have 5, 6 cards on the board at all times. You're gonna have 3 or 4 cards on the board, like regularly, and then a bunch of, and cards rotating in and out very quickly and constantly. So in that case, as long as the game works the way I think it will, which is there's gonna be a lot of back and forth, and there's gonna be very few units on the board at all times. Think maybe 2 or 3 units. This card loses a lot of value, and it's very expensive for this kind of effect, right? So you know, now at least it's not magic, right? Like magic, this card would be so bad you would never touch it because your opponent could respond by, bouncing your guy to your hand. So at least when you play it, you're gonna get the effect, so that doesn't feel as bad. I think the problem is, um, one is, you have to find the perfect combo. You're like, okay, my opponent has uh, 2 health, and I have a guy that has exactly 2 power, etc. It's just not always going to line up right all the time. So this is where I think this will be a good card. You're definitely going to love this in limited, right? In limited, this is an amazing card. This is you're gonna take it every time. But in a constructed kind of format, this is very, very mediocre for the kind of effect it is. There's too many conditions. It's a little expensive. Who knows how expensive the other removal will be, but I have to imagine that like it'll be a little bit cheaper and more consistent than this, right? We already saw Vader, right? It's like doing 2 damage every time it attacks. Like that's way more consistent you know, than this. Uh, Now the cool thing here is that um, if you're all in on like one strategy, like let's say that you go all in on space and your opponent is ground, you use this card to clear up the ground. Like that could work, right? Like in that kind of a deck where you're just going all in on something, because again, it doesn't say like space or space. We also don't know the rules though, like, but I assume that like this doesn't this applies so that you can cross barriers. That's actually going to kind of feel weird though, I would say. Like imagine you have 2 stormtroopers and they take down like a rebel ship. You're like, how did that happen? Like they just, So I maybe this only works in a single arena. So I'll hold off on my final evaluation of whether this is a C or a D until then. But overall, it's probably not amazing card. And we could go through this. Do I want it in my opening hand? No. Do I want to turn six? Turn six is probably the best turn for this card. But then after that, it's pretty bad. Um, is this going to help you win more if you're already winning? Maybe. Is this going to help you if you're losing? No, right? You don't have anything in play. You can't even use this card. So this is going to shine in a stalemate, and that's where somebody's going to say, "See, this card's amazing," because in this one game we had a stalemate, and so it was amazing in that one game. Board is empty. This is a terrible card. Board is full. Card is decent, but again, it's not like overwhelming. It's not cost efficient. Um, do I want to if I'm on the offense? It's probably slightly better. Um, it's actually probably slightly better on the offense, and the reason is because then it can help you remove a blocker. So on the defense, it's definitely not going to be as good. Which it's kind of interesting because you would think a card like this would be better on the defense, but no, this is going to be a more offensive card, I believe. All right. Now, before we go into Tarkin, I want to talk about him last. Let's go into You're My Only Hope. So here we go. This is a really interesting effect. 3 cost. Look at the top card of your deck. You may play it. It costs 5 less. If your base has 5 or less remaining HP, it's free. So yeah, this is a lot harder to evaluate, right? Because we don't know all the cards, and so we don't know if there's a 10 mana, you know, Death Star that, or in this case, I don't know, some sort of super weapon that the light side has that is going to blow the game away. And so this is, you play this card because you just win the game if you play it, right? So we don't know if that exists, but let's evaluate it as if it's similar to Magic or Hearthstone. So okay, one, and the way I like to evaluate these cards again is what are the conditions, what are the odds of me having success, versus failure, and what is the value. So let's focus on 2 numbers, the 3 and the 5. So I pay 3 mana and I get to play a card for 5 less. So let's do some basic math. Um, in a normal deck, like Hearthstone deck, the vast majority of your cards are going to be less than 5 cost. So right away, we know that if if this is like a if you're in a fast deck, this is a super mana inefficient, and you're gonna cry a lot when you play this card. It'll be really sad. Um, so you're not gonna play this card in an aggressive deck, like in any way. Um, so what would you play this in? You would play this in a really slow kind of deck that where you could ideally manipulate the top of your deck. Um, so this is a control deck card, like 100% control deck card. Um, how good is it at a control deck card? I would say not very good. Uh, so and this is where the evaluation criteria helps a lot. So let's ask ourselves: do I want this card? Oh, where did my evaluation go? Do I want this card in my opening hand? No. You're not playing this on turn 3 because you have a choice. You have a 3 mana unit you can play, or you can take a risk and play a unit on the top of your deck and hope it's also at least a 3 mana card, because otherwise you'll feel really sad if you drew your bear or your 1 mana card at the top. That would feel really bad. And so yeah, you're not going to play this on turn 3. No way. Like you're taking a massive gamble. It's just not worth it. Do I want this on turn 6? This is probably where this card is going to shine, right? You hey, it's turn 6. I don't get to use all my mana efficiently. This helps me draw another card and and play it for cheaper if it's cheaper. The problem is like you have to play this card first. So imagine like this is gonna be a real feels bad. Imagine you have it's turn so it'd be like turn 5. So you have 6 resources in play, and you have this and another 3 mana card, and you're like, okay, well, you have to play this first because remember, once you can play it, but you still have to pay the cost of the card that you draw. So you have to play this first. and you flip it over, and it's 7 mana. Not 7. Yeah, 7 is maybe good. It's 7. So you get to play this, your 3 mana 7, your 7 mana card, and you get to leave a card in your hand, but you only got to play one card this turn. Now let's imagine you have two 3 mana cards in your hand. You get to play both of them. It's gonna be better, right? Like, yeah, you might get lucky and hit something big, but in general, you always want to reduce like randomness. So this is kind of doing the opposite. Now, if you can manipulate the top of the deck, card evaluation changes completely. This might work in a very well in a specific constructed deck, but no way for me to evaluate that at this point. So do I want this on turn 10? Eh, maybe. It lets me see another card, which you know I could have played another card instead in my deck, but hey, it might be okay. If I'm winning, do I want this card? Um, Not really, because this card might actually make it so that you're not winning as much as you were. Like, so no. Do I want this card if I'm losing? Um, yes, actually, probably. This card can definitely be one of those cards that turns it around from being where you're losing to at least having a fighting chance. So, but it's also one of those cards where like it could make your odds of winning worse, like a lot worse. As if you just had a regular card, you would have been okay. But so this is like maybe 50-50. Do I want this in a stalemate? It's not really going to make a difference. Do I want this if the board is empty? Um, no. Do I want this if the board is full? If it's full, it's fine. I think that's where one of those times where it's good to gamble a little bit. Is the card cost efficient? Absolutely not. Um, at least not unless your base has less than 5 health. This is one of those cards. It's like you get you get to pay 3 mana for the privilege of saving 2 mana on the top card of your deck. Not it's and you don't get to see it until you draw it. So, do I want this card on offense? Um, no, because it's not gonna help me win faster. Do I want this card on defense? Again, I would rather have something else probably. So I think this card is pretty bad. Now again, caveat that with there's probably going to be some sort of combo deck out there that manipulates the top of your deck and puts your massive 10-10 card on top. Your 10-10 on top, and then this card like fits in a specific role for that deck, but it doesn't fit in any other deck. So that's enough about that card. And now the last card, and before the end of my video. So let's talk about Tarkin here. And I saved this one because I feel like this is a good example of a card where this card, if it was in Magic or if it was in Hearthstone, it would be evaluated very, very differently than if it's here in Star Wars Unlimited. So let's start with the stats. 4 mana, 2/3, not great stats, right? Like you're not happy about playing a 4 mana 2/3 in either of those games, and probably not here as well. So let's read the text. Hopefully that makes up for it. Search the top 5 cards of your deck for 2 Imperial cards, reveal them, and draw them. Put the other cards in the bottom of your deck in a random order. So this is the perfect card for my evaluation criteria and why it's important to evaluate the cards with these kinds of questions to ask. Is drawing 2 cards out of the top 5 worth it? Is it valuable? How do we know if this is going to be good unless we actually test it? So, and here's where we're going to evaluate it. We're going to go straight to the evaluation criteria. So let's imagine the first scenario, right? So the first scenario was, do I want this card in my opening hand? And the answer is no. And the reason is because let's look at him. Do you want to play a 4 mana 2/3 on turn? This would be turn turn on turn 3. On turn 3, do you want to be playing a 2 mana a 2/3? No, you don't want that. Okay, so will the effect make up for the fact that I had to play a 2/3? No. So why do I say that? And and that is very different than Hearthstone and Magic, by the way. In Magic, 4 mana 2/3 that draws 2 cards is amazing. Like it's brilliant. You want that card every time. The reason why it doesn't matter as much in Star Wars Universe, oh, it's unlimited, Star Wars Unlimited, is because you get to draw 2 cards every turn. So the impact of drawing 2 additional cards is a lot less. In fact, I actually think this card would need to say draw 3 cards for this to be effective. It probably would need to cost 5, but if this was 5 mana, 2/3, draw 3, and it didn't have the restriction of Imperial, I think this would be a great card. It'd be an all-star card. But because it's draw 2, because Star Wars Unlimited, you're already drawing 2 cards a turn. And remember, you don't have to play a resource, right? So you're already drawing 2 cards a turn. Do you want this in your opening hand? No, it's not going to help you win faster. It might help you build up your hand and make your hand really big, but having a big hand isn't going to do anything if your opponent is killing you, right? So the answer, opening hand, my opinion, absolutely not. Do I want this on turn 6? This is interesting. On turn 6, I think the answer is maybe, right? Like I think the answer is, you know, turn 6 you're gonna have what 7 resources. So you play this and you get to see a few cards and then pick one. So maybe you play this plus you know, um, a, a 3 mana 3/3. And so you get, a 2/3 and a 3/3 in play for um, for 7 resources, and you got an extra card. That's pretty good. It's pretty good. It's not amazing, but it's pretty good. Um, so and that's a good draw. If it's going to be a real bad draw if you have no Imperials. So this, if your deck has no Imperials, obviously this card doesn't do anything. So this is not a good, probably not going to be a great limited card unless you happen to get a lot of the Imperials. But it might fit into a very specific kind of tribal deck for Imperials, and be decent in the middle of the game. There's definitely going to be times where it'll help you win the game. Do you want this card on turn 10? Now, these kind of cards on turn 10 are always amazing. Like, you're on turn 10 and you get to look at 5 more cards at the top of your deck. This card goes from, in your opening hand, this card to me is an F, and then this card goes into an A. And so, you know, and then on turn 6, I think this card's a C. So like, how do you evaluate a card like this? Is it an A? Is it an F? Is it a C? It's like, well, let's look at some more situations. So if you're winning, do you want this card? Actually no, because you're already winning. You don't need more cards. You just need to play more cards, right? Like, unless your hand is empty, which again, if you're drawing 2 cards a turn, your hand is likely not to be empty. So it's not really going to help you if you're winning. Do I want this card if I'm losing? I think the answer here is maybe. I think it might help you to find and dig deeper and to find like a very specific card. As long as it can help you find, like, maybe if there's a really nice event card that's also Imperial, um, that could be really good, like a removal card. Um, so I don't know. This could be good, but maybe not. Do I want this card if there's a stalemate? Yes, absolutely. That's probably when it's gonna shine. So this is gonna be the card where you're on turn 6 and the game's in a stalemate, no one's winning, and you play this card and you get to see 5 cards deeper in your deck and you find two amazing cards, and it just turns the game around. That's when this card is going to be absolutely excellent, and that's never going to happen. That'll happen once in a while, but it's not going to happen to you very often. Do I want this card when the board is empty? Actually, this card is pretty good when it's empty, right? If the board's empty, you get to play him. He doesn't really do anything, but like it lets you dig pretty good. Do I want this card if the board is full? I think this one question is hard to answer because I think this one is highly contextual on, uh, you know, um, what turn it is. So, is card cost efficient? I would say yes, it's pretty efficient. Um, not for its stats, but for the fact that you get to get two more cards, hopefully. Um, so I think its efficiency is fine. It's not amazing, but it's good. Do I want this card if I'm on the offense? This is like where it kills it, right? Like, no, I don't want this card. I just want another. I want my 4 mana. So if you know Hearthstone, the Chillwind Yeti. If I'm on the offense and it's turn 3, I want my 4 mana 4/5. I don't want to play 4 mana 2/3. You know, those two extra cards don't mean anything. So this is not an offensive card. This is a mid-game card. This is for a mid-game deck where you're going to be in a lot of stalemates. So no, absolutely. This is not. This is a card for a boring game where no one's winning. It's going to turn the game around. But if you're winning the game already, it's not really going to do that much. And if you're losing the game, I do think it can help a little bit with when you're losing and being on, and if you're on the defensive, right? Like your base is being attacked. Maybe this helps. You put a creature out and you get to find like some sort of event card that helps slow things down. So it could be pretty good. Um, but you're never gonna play this on offense. Um, you're never gonna play this before turn 6. Um, you're and so these kind of cards lose a lot of value. And I think the thing that really takes it down for me and why I think this card's a C and not like a B um, is drawing. You get to draw two cards anyway. So you're not actually going as deep into your deck as you think you're going. So anyway, those are my thoughts. I'll do another video on the cards that have been spoiled already. Please subscribe or like to my channel if you're interested in hearing my thoughts on those. And thank you for watching this video, and have a great day.